Okay. The reason that today we are, the class is short is because we're just going to look at the IP version for addressing. All of you, or if not most of you, have gone through this in NetCom. So this is sort of like a refresher course. And why we are doing this refresher course is because some students have not taken NetCom because they got a credit transfer. And some of you guys, well, most probably have forgotten. And IP addressing is a basis that you will need for everything, all the configuration. Okay, a mistake in IP can mean that a subnet doesn't work, a PC cannot go to the internet, it cannot travel outside of the subnet. So there is importance in understanding and actually mastering IP version 4 addressing. Let's continue. So a few basic things, okay? So IP address is used to identify a host within a network. So as every one of you guys have names, every device in a network will have a sort of like a way for them to be identified, and that is the IP address. So a single IP address is given to each interface or each device. So for a PC, for example, it has one network interface, so it has one IP address. A router, on the other hand, it has many different interfaces, and every, hold on a second, and every interface of the router, it needs to have its own IP address. The reason is that every interface is its own subnet. Okay, so because this belong in this subnet, it has to have interface for this subnet, because this here interface belongs to this subnet down here, so it has to have the IP address that belongs to that subnet, and so on. So in this case, in this particular case, because this router has three interfaces that is being used, so it has three different IP addresses. So each IP address, IP version 4 address, is 32 bits long, and it is set in 4 octets. Okay, 4 octets. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. An octet is 8 bits. So this is an octet. So here we have 4 octets, and it is typically written in dotted decimal notation. So 192.164, sorry, .64.22.31. So that is what you call a dotted decimal notation. A subnet is a group of hosts identified with having the same portion, that is the number of bits of their IP address. So for example, in these 4 addresses here, you would see that the network portion of it, 192.168.1, is the same for all 4 addresses. The only difference is the one on the host side. Okay, so this portion is given by the subnet mask /24, because if you see here, this is 3 octets. 3 octets is 24 bits. That's why we have /24. So each IP address can be divided into a network portion and a host portion. The network portion is indicated by the subnet mask. So in this case down here, this is the IP address, and then it has the /24, which is the subnet mask. Subnet mask tells you how many bits out of the 32 belongs to the network portion. So in this case, 24 bits belongs to the network portion, 8 bits belongs to the host portion. Why do we need to know this network and host portion? When you are doing subnetting, this is the knowledge that you need to know so that you can subnet correctly. Okay. In subnetting, you cannot touch anything on the network portion. You can only change or subnet the ones in the host portion. So this is a basic example. We have a network topology here, okay? And in this topology, there is 1, 2, 3 subnets. As you can see, every interface of the router belongs to a different subnet. And every interface have an IP address that, coincides with that subnet. So here you have 223.1.1, 223.1.2, 223.1.3, because it belongs to different subnets. This you have seen before, so I think I'm just going to go and answer it for you. But how many subnets do we have here? Some students, they calculate how many interfaces that the routers have. For example, this router has 3, this router has 3, this router has 3, that means there are 9 subnets, which is not right, because this here, this is 1, because they are shared. So in total, in this topology here, we have 6 subnet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. These 3 in the middle here is actually small subnets. They don't need a lot of IP addresses within that subnet, because there are only 2, N here and here, that needs an IP address. Nobody else needs it. Okay. So given the information, we find that the host has 8 bits. In this case, the host has 8 bits. Okay. So this subnet can have up to 2 to the power of 8, that is 256 hosts. Okay, 256, because we have 8 bits here. So the host, the IP address can be between 22.0 until 22.255. And as you all know, for a subnet, the first and the last IP address cannot be assigned to a device, because the first address is the network address. This is used to address the subnet. And the last address is what you call a broadcast address. And this is used when you want to send to everyone within the subnet. You want to broadcast something to everyone within the subnet, you use the broadcast address. So if you're given an IP address and a subnet mask, can you find the network address and the broadcast address? The answer is yes. Now you might be thinking, why would you need to do that? Because if you are, if you work in an organization and you are the new guy, the new recruit, so they have had their networks and whatsoever. And if a problem comes, you need to know which subnet that device or that PC belongs to. So how do you find the subnet? Is by taking the IP address of that device and then, doing these 2 ways to find the network address and the broadcast address. One way to do this is that we know that because this is 24, 24 bits belongs to the network portion that we cannot touch. We can only touch the last 8 bits. So in that sense, when the host portion is set to all zeros, when the last 8 bits is set to all zeros, it becomes the network address. It will show you the network address. And if you set it to all ones, it will give you the broadcast address. So easy peasy. The host portion all zeros will give you the network address. The host portion all ones will give you the broadcast address. Another way of doing it is to use AND. Okay, you take the IP address and you AND it with the subnet mask. Now, how do we get 255 from /24? Here, it means all of the 8 bits here is 1. So this is 8, this is 8, this is 8, that's 24. So if you set all the 24 bits to 1, you will get this, 255.255.255.0. You AND this together. If you remember, when you AND something with 0, it is 0. When you AND something with a number, you get, that number. If you AND something with a 1, you get that number. So here, these are all ones. Of course, this will be 192, 168, 1, and then 0. And this will give you the network address. Again, putting the host portion to all ones will give you the broadcast address. Easy. Now, very, very important to note that the subnet mask tells you a line that you cannot cross. Okay, it tells you a line. In this case, for example, is /30. That means 30 bits here, and I drew a line here. This is a line you cannot cross. Okay, because this is a line that identifies the network portion. You cannot touch the network portion. You can only change or update the host portion. So if we look here, 30 means there's only 2 bits left for the host portion. So all zeros will give you the network address, all ones will give you the broadcast address, and then in the middle between the network and broadcast address, you have the usable IP. And in this case, because it's /30, there is only 2 usable IPs. And this is usually used for the connection between routers because they only need 2 IP address, 1 on each end. So you don't need to use a lot of IP addresses here. This is /16. Again, the line is there. Network portion is 16-bit. Host portion is 16-bit. And if you see here, all the host portion zeros, you get the network address. All the host portion 1, you get the broadcast address. And in between that, you get the usable IP. And this one being a slash 16, the number of hosts that you can actually give IP addresses to is higher. Okay, so 2 to the power of 16 minus 2. That is how much you can give an IP address to. So how do we subnet? We have been saying subnetting, subnetting, subnetting. So there are two ways for you to divide subnets or to do subnetting. One is to divide everything to the same size. Okay, so every subnet gets the same number of hosts. Another way is to divide the subnet according to their needs. Okay, rather than if you need 2 IP addresses, you give them 100, you just give them 2. Okay, so these are the two different ways, and you have done it before. So I'm just going to go through here a little bit. So let's say a company has been given this network address, 192.168.1.0/24. So the company has 4 departments, R&D, sales, finance, and HR. Okay, and each department has a different need. But because we're going to divide it equally for all the department, we are not going to look at the needs. We're just going to take this address and divide it by 4. How do we do that? First thing is to make sure that we identify the network and host portion. We know the network portion here in red is not supposed to be touched. How do we know network portion is 24 bits? Because it's /24. So this 8 bits here, these bits are the ones that we are going to borrow from. Okay, so how many are we going to borrow? Borrow here means you are taking bits from the host portion and making it part of the network portion. Okay, you're borrowing a few bits from the host portion and then you are making it as part of the network portion for the same size, for the equal size subnetting. So because there are 4 departments, of course, we need 4 subnets. So IP addressing are binary and it's on base 2, so you know to use 2 to the power of what will give you 4, and that what, or x in this case, is 2 bits. So we are going to borrow 2 bits. Now, because this is equal size subnetting, we are borrowing from the closest to the line, closest to the network portion. So we borrow from this side, from the leftmost side. So we borrow 2 bits here and we put a line here. What does this line mean? This line means now that these 2 bits, they belong as part of the network portion. They are not part of the host portion anymore. So then, if you see here, all zeros, because initially there were 8, we borrowed 2, so now the host portion, the new host portion for the new subnets would only have 6 bits. So all 0 will give you the network address, all 1s will give you the broadcast address. Once we have that, because we are doing 4, so we have subnet 0, subnet 1, subnet 2, subnet 3. The first subnet is subnet 0, the second subnet is subnet 1, third subnet is subnet 2, and the fourth subnet is subnet 3. So let's say we look at this one. For subnet 0, okay, the network address is 192.168.1.0, and the broadcast address is 192.168.1.63. Okay. They would also get, when you assign to everyone, okay, you assign R&D and sales and finance and HR, they would get their own subnets. But one thing you have to realize here is that their subnet mask right now will change. For example, initially it is /24, but for the R&D subnet now, it will be /26. Why? Because these 2 bits have been moved to become part of the network portion. Okay? Usable addresses are between the network address and the broadcast address. So we can fill in a table like this. We'll tell you the network address, the broadcast address, usable address range, and the subnet mask. So we just complete that. Now, it is always good to have this understanding or have like a plan to your network when you work. A lot of people, they patch, they forget that how did we build this network? Okay, so it's good for the network administrator to know. So far, any questions? Put up your hands if you have questions. And give the peace sign if you don't. Okay, all is good. So because all is good, I am leaving you with an exercise to do. This is in the slides I gave you. So this is an exercise that I would like for you to try out. My class from Netcom, so whoever has been in my class before have done this. So I'm not going to go one by one through it. What I would like for you to do is today do this, and then if you face a problem on Thursday, we will discuss this. Okay? I have every bit of confidence that all of you can do this, because if you cannot do this, most probably you won't be in this class. But if you do face a problem or you are confused or anything for that matter, you can ask me and then we'll discuss it on Thursday. Okay? So this is in the slides. I have the answers as well. Don't worry about it. You can check this, but I want you to do it yourself without the calculator preferably and see what you can do with this. Okay, this is exercise for subnets. Again, you can do this at home. Okay? If you have a question, you can ask, because I think most of you can do this already. Now, I am going to jump into the example of dividing the subnet or subnetting following need. Just now we just looked at we have 4 departments. We need to divide it into 4. Okay? Now we are going to divide it according to their needs. Main need means R&D would have a larger portion of a subnet. HR would have a smaller portion of the subnet. Because if we divide everyone the same, we give everyone 100 IP, R&D would have 50 extra, but HR would have 90 extra, and nobody can use that. So that is waste of IP address. So how do we do follow need? Same thing as we did before. The first step is to define the network portion and the host portion. So again, the network address is 192.168.1.0/24. 24 bits belong to the network portion, 8 bits belong to the host portion. But a bit different in borrowing, rather than borrow the same number of bits for every subnet, here we are going to borrow according to needs. Excuse me. For example, R&D 50 users, right? So how many bits do you need to borrow for 50 users? Now, one thing you need to remember, I'm hoping the annotation can work, is that these are the things that you have to remember, okay? 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. These are the only things you need to remember, okay? 2 to the power of 0 is 1, 2 to the power of 5 is 32, 2 to the power of 7 is 128. Okay, so these are the things that you have to remember. And if we go back and look at how many R&D users need, 50 users, you see that it, either you give them 32, which is not going to be enough, or you give them 64, will be a bit more than 50. Of course, we're not going to give them 128. So if you see here, 64, that means we need to borrow 6 bits. Okay. So for users, sales, 30 users, 5 bits, 20 users, 5 bits, because even though they say 20, we only have between 16 and 32. 16 is not going to be enough. 32 is the way to go. And then HR10, we have 4 bits of that. Okay. Now, always remember to add 2. Sometimes, like for example, sales here, this is easy. Sales is 30, and then you plus 2 for the network and broadcast address. You have a very tight fit. Ngam, as they say. You really get a tight fit. But if sales has 32 devices, you now have to go find for 34, because you have to add the network address and the broadcast address. Okay. So another difference between equal subnetting and variable subnetting is that where you borrow the bits from. Okay. And one, we start from the largest to the smallest. So R&D was the largest, and it needs 6 bits. We borrow from right hand side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We borrow from the side. Okay. And for this subnet 0 R&D, this particular subnet, the lines will be here. Okay. The subnet mask will be /26. And if you notice here, this is 0, this is 63, and I put a 1 there. This is where you start for the new subnet. Okay, for the new subnet, we are going to start sales from there. And then this is the new one. We're going to start finance from here. And then this is HR and so on. So for sales, we need 5 bits. We borrow from this side again. The borrowed bits are shown in green here, okay? And then finance needs 5 bits. We borrow from here. HR needs 4 bits. We borrow from here. Now, the ones over here, the ones in red, that sort of like shows you the boundary of where it stops and where the new one is going to start. So if this is 63, the next one will start at 64. If this is 95, the next one will start at 96. If this is 127, the next subnet will start at 128. Some students like to do subnetting in a different way. Okay? Not wrong, but I would prefer for students to do it this way, because this way it helps you, one, see what you are doing clearly, and two, find all the answers you need within that. Just looking at this, if I ask you, what is the broadcast address of finance? You can directly find it as 192.168.1.127. That is the broadcast address for finance. Can you give me 3 addresses that can be given to devices in sales? 3. Choose any 3 between here. 65, 66, 67. Okay. 91, 92, 93. Okay. Can you see? Just looking at this, you get your answers already. So this way, not only it gives you a way for you to check your answers, it also gives you a way to get your answers much more faster. Okay? So far, so good?
Doctor, I have a question about just now, the 32 usable address. Like for example, because just now doctor mentions about we need to add 2 more for NA and BA, right? The network address and broadcast address. So total we need is 34. So we cannot use 2 power 5 and we need to use 2 power 6, right, in order to get 34.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
Okay. So moving on, same thing as just now. This is the subnet for R&D. You have your network address and broadcast address, and then the usable address is in between. And what is the subnet mask for all these different subnets? You count all of the bits before the green one. So here for R&D is /26, for sales is /27, for finance is /27, for HR is /28. Okay, so that means anything that is not the green is considered part of the network portion for that subnet. So in this case, 2 bits here belongs there. In this case, 3 bits here belong to the network portion. So again, same thing, subnet, network address, broadcast address, and so on. You fill it in. And an exercise. Okay? So, any other questions before we start with the class activity, i.e. your quiz?
Doctor, what is the difference between configure terminal and configure?
Okay. You should try this when you do your lab, okay? When you type configure only, it will ask you, do you want to configure terminal? And you have to enter yes. And then it will go to the global configuration mode. But if you directly type configure terminal, it will directly bring you to the global configuration mode.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Questions? Yes, no? Okay. Hi, hi. Who is that?
Ling Xuan.
Yes.
One question regarding the lab.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there is one lab that asks us to do the packet tracer. Is it for that lab also we don't need to submit the packet tracer, only the PDF version?
Yeah. Because the
So we
packet tracer you have to
screenshot.
do, they will give you the, hold on, hold on. Is this the lab where it has instruction, but it doesn't have any questions in it, but you have to use the packet tracer and then the
Yes,
packet tracer?
it
Okay.
only gives the Word version or
Okay.
PDF
In,
version.
in that sense, for the packet tracer one, if there is no questions, but they just ask you to do the packet tracer and then they give you the percentage, right? In packet tracer.
No, this is the lab that only give the PDF version and ask us to create a packet tracer. I think 2.9 or something. The lab.
Okay. If it doesn't give you a packet tracer to do, that means they want the percentage. If it just only give you what you call it, a lab sheet, what I want is just the lab sheet. If the lab sheet has questions on it, like what do you find, you answer those. If it doesn't, then no need to submit. But I think there is. From the top of my head, I cannot remember all the labs, but if it doesn't have any questions on it, it just asks you to do it on packet tracer. Just do it on packet tracer and no need to submit the lab sheet. What I need from the lab sheet is that when you do things and then they ask you questions, I need to see your answer to those questions. Because those answers will tell me whether or not you understand. Now, some students, they just submit empty lab sheets. I'm fine with that. Submit empty lab sheets. But I will see in the skill-based exam. Okay, so if it doesn't have anything on it, it doesn't have any questions that you have to answer, only a sort of like do this, do this, do this, do this, then you don't have to submit that. But do it, just don't submit it. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Everybody okay? Okay. Do you have questions regarding subnetting? Okay. In that sense, we are going to start your quiz. Okay? What I want you to do is I want you to find one piece, two piece paper. Okay? I'm going to give you one question at a time. Okay? No calculators, please. I'm going to trust you that you don't use calculators. Okay? So I'll give you a series of questions, one question at a time. And every question has a time limit. I will keep time. Okay? Once the time is finished, I will go to the next question. What you need to do is after you finish all the answers, you need to take a picture, put it into a Word document, save it, okay? And then upload it to e-learning. You have until 1 p.m. today to upload everything. Okay? Questions before we move? Some questions are 2 minutes, some questions are 5 minutes. And once I start the timer, I stop it and then we move to the next one. So before I start, any questions? If you don't have any questions, put a peace sign or whatever, so that I know you don't have any questions. All right. Okay, get ready. You have your papers? You have your pen? Ready, steady, and go. First one. Don't need to rewrite the question, just the answer. Five minutes is very long. 3 minutes. Please make sure to show me your workings, okay? Not just the answers, how you get the answer. You have to show me your workings.
Doctor, we write the answer in decimal, right? Instead of binary, right?
Yes, in decimal. I'm sure a lot of you have finished and there's now relaxing waiting for the next question. But for those who are not, don't panic yet, but you have less than a minute before I move to the next question. Get ready. Okay, here it comes. Next one. Okay, you have less than a minute before we go to the next question. Right, get ready. Next question. Right, you have less than a minute to go. Okay, and that is the end. I'm sure all of you can answer all of the questions. So right now, I want you to take a picture of your answers and then, put it in a Word document, save it as PDF, and then upload to e-learning. Okay? So any other questions?